don't come to talk or to reason. I come to cut down the wicked, sent from the Almighty. I bring fire and rain, floods and pestilence. Your hate has no place, you have no say anymore. You cannot run or hide anymore. All the fish in the sea, a third of humanity, the earth is blessed. I come in the name of Almighty God, a brighter than a billion suns. I come to slay the wicked. I come to end their plight. I come because the Lord is God. I know your name. I know you came, I know where you live. If you don't belong to the living God, if you're not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, you were warned, you have no excuse. You have no brothers or fathers or mothers. Down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down. By their fruits you shall know them, not hard to see. I'll give you a head start. Knock you down, straight 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 down.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. That was Zeph Daniels' new song, Straight Down. You can find that on Spreaker.com. Welcome to the Porthole to Justice. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Join the live chat. And I have an exciting show planned today. A really good friend of mine for many years, who is a 27-year court corruption investigator and host of the TV show on Second Thought that is local out of Santa Barbara, California. My home, one of my old stomping grounds, is joining me this afternoon. So let me go ahead and have him call. Let's see. Stand by. He also has a YouTube series that's really good. Okay. And he's in the Social Media News Network. Let's see. Stand by. we're going to be talking about, I wanted to ask him because he's actually an expert on this topic. I'm going to be asking him about citizen grand juries. All right. Standing by. Go ahead and give me a call. Let's see. Hold on just a second. All right. All right. Standing by, William. Let me find some. I'm loving Zeph Daniels' music lately. It is so good. I really enjoy it because it's like something different from just hearing like the same old songs, humdrum, the same old beat. Okay, I gotta have something different every once in a while. Okay, William, give me a call. Where are you at? Yesterday I had on Michael Gill and State of Corruption. He also had a TV show in New Hampshire, very popular TV show. So a lot of folks are losing that have really large followings, huge platforms. I think he has like 300,000 followers of his State of Corruption, and yeah, I think they took it down. Not giving up, though. I got my coffee here. Okay. Where are you at? What happened? Let me see if I can't find his number. Myself. Get the show on the road. I had someone comment in the comment section.
Please leave your message for...
Oh no.
William Wagener.
On my show with Michael Gill. Hi, William. This is Amelia. I'm standing by. I'm live on the air, and I was wondering if you could give me a call. All right. Talk to you soon. Somebody commented that, that Michael Gill hadn't gone to We the People for citizens grand juries. And I didn't, when we're live on a radio show educating the public on the corruption, I didn't quite understand his point. However, he did have a good suggestion on citizen grand juries. And the person that I know that is the best and an expert on that very topic is William Wagener himself. So I'm waiting. All right. Let's see. Oh no, he said somebody is hacking his computer. Google. What? I just got a message. Oh no. What is going on?
Please leave your message for
William Wagener.
Hi, William. It's Amelia. I'm just trying to reach out to you again. I received your email message. I'm live right now on the air, so I'll wait a few more minutes. All right, give me a call on this number. It's ASAP. All right, thanks. Okay, well, hopefully we get to do this show. Today. What is going on? Well, I'll try one more time. I just spoke to him like a half an hour ago.
Please leave your message for
William Wagener.
Okay. Well, sorry I missed you, William. I thought we just spoke a half an hour ago. I'm live on the air. All right. Okay. Well, I may have to reschedule. I don't have anything else planned for a show today. Oh, man. Let me see if there's a couple articles. Oh, great news. I do have some good news to report. Stand by. Let me pull this up. Great news in the porthole to justice on Facebook exclusively. Sean McMillan, who's been a member in the port for many years and a personal friend of mine, who actually he's been on the show. He's been on the show a couple times. Maybe we can get him back on. That would be a great interview. If you're listening, Sean, you need to come on and say hello. Update us on what's new. I posted a link to an article. Sean wins again. Congratulations. San Diego County has agreed to settle 2 lawsuits by former foster children who alleged that the county had failed to protect them from abuse by former foster parents. Then involved one of the children's privacy, resulting in litigation, according to papers filed Tuesday in the courts. The filing notified the court that both parties had reached an agreement for both lawsuits on the 9th of August 2018, but it's not disclosed the terms of the settlement yet. And this is in the San Diego Union Tribune. Sean McMillan is known for also winning the Vreeken Hardwick case, where Child Protective Services tried to argue the right to lie to remove children. And the courts, absolutely not. They tried to make the argument that it was free speech to, accept lies into court documents. So it's a pretty interesting case. You can look it up on YouTube. Vreeken versus Hardwick. And that's what's going on there. Congratulations to you, Sean. Well done. Well done. And congratulations to those foster children. That's a huge victory. Let's see. And then a really rough case that's been kind of hard for me to digest, but out of Miami Beach, Florida, the mother of a 3-year-old girl who was killed last week in Miami Beach was previously investigated by the Florida Department of Children and Family Services. A spokeswoman confirmed Tuesday And I guess the reports involved heroin use by the mother. It's just a really, really sad story. Breaks my heart because she told people that she was being hurt. She reached out to a lot of individuals. Okay. And then on another note, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get an interview with this woman. This is classic. You guys got to hear this, okay? I have to caution you, there is some foul language that's going to be used, but this is an audio clip of a DCFS social worker trying to do an in-house visit with a police officer, and this woman is absolutely awesome. If you're tuning into my show and you listen, I'd love to have you on as a guest. So yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
So, my name's Alyssa.
No, I'm not going to talk to you. You get the fuck off my property. You get out of here. No. No. Get the fuck out of here. You ain't got a warrant. Get the fuck out of here. Okay? I don't give a fuck what you think you have, bitch. Get off my fucking property.
Okay, can you tell me why?
Get the fuck off my property.
Okay, we'll leave.
We're just here to check on your son's safety, that's all.
There was already a police thing done. There's nothing here.
I don't know anything about
Fuck
that.
you, bitch. You don't fucking know nothing. Fuck you.
Why do you want to cuss her out?
Because she's a state goddamn fucking piece of shit worker. That's fucking why.
She's here because of a report made.
I don't give a fuck. What the fuck? She ain't shit. Do you understand? There were no laws broken. There was no nothing done. I am not fucking with you. I am not fucking with you.
And there's no responsibility. You've done nothing but
Bullshit. I don't give a fuck. These people aren't fucking nice. They're not your goddamn friend. I don't know who the fuck you think you are, because I've already had police at my motherfucking house. They did their investigation. They found nothing. Now you need to get your little self down that motherfucking road unless you got a goddamn warrant.
Do you like a card with my name on it?
I don't want shit from you. You had no business being here. You have no business fucking with me. You have no business.
And I'm trying to explain it to you. She does because...
No, she doesn't. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. It is not the goddamn law. Fucking cunt. Fuck yourself.
That was posted.
Shit, goddamn fucking cunt worker.
Oh my gosh, that is viral online, and it has it looks like 2,589,278 views, something crazy like that, and classic. Well, I am gonna go. Oh wait, perfect. I was gonna close off with a song, but we got William here. Stand by. Hi, William.
Hello, this is William Wagener.
Hi, welcome to the Porthole to Justice. You are live.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I like to be alive. I like to stay alive.
Me too. I hear you, right? So I had hosted a show with Michael Gill, who he had a platform and a TV show called State of Corruption, and someone had commented in the live chat that we weren't being proactive enough because we weren't going to the people to form citizens grand juries, and I thought, who is the best person and the expert that I could talk to on this subject to educate? And it, you came to mind first.
Well, how much time do we have?
As much time as you like.
Well, I don't know if I'm the expert on grand juries. I think the expert on the grand juries wrote a book. His name was Winters. He wrote a book on common law. And most people don't know the difference between common law and statutory law. the American Revolution was a revolt against law by edict of the king or governors that claimed to represent the king. That's what the American Revolution was about. And when the framers of the Constitution, which already had a government prior to the formation of the United States in lowercase of America, with only the first letter capitalized, before that government was formed, they already had a government. And that was the government that got them through the Revolutionary War, and it was a ragtag. We barely hung together, but we did it. And the reason they hung together, because they knew if they didn't hang together, they would hang separately. King George would send his henchman, General Gage, and they would hunt down every patriot. We now call patriots. They called rebels and rebellious riffraff. We are the inheritors of the rebellious riffraff. Okay, the people that they didn't want to have any voice in government. And at the time, we were not a majority. In fact, through the entire American Revolutionary War, the so-called patriot movement, as we call them now, never even reached 50%. At best, at the best time, depending on what year you pick, 1777 or 1781, at the best, we probably had 1/3 of the 500,000 inhabitants of what we call now the original 13 colonies. There was only about 500,000 of them, and only 1/3 was mildly to super extremely pro-revolution and revolt against King George III. Out of that 1/3 of 500,000, which you're talking about 180,000 people, out of that 180,000 people, only about 1/3 of those were actually willing to pick up a gun, load their gunpowder, and shoot at their government soldiers. Remember, their government was the United Kingdom or the British Empire. That was the government. And only 1 out of 9 people was actually so angry and so revved up because their son had been impressed into the King's Navy 4 or 5 years earlier and then killed in a battle with the French that was none of our business, or their daughter was raped by a British soldier who was forced to take the British soldiers and lodge with them. That's why you see this rhetoric in the Constitution that the government cannot lodge soldiers in civilian households. They cannot force that upon you. Nor can there be a standing army for longer than 2 years. All these things that seem weird to us now were very understandable 230 years ago. The people understood very, very clearly why we didn't want law by edict. So when they formed to create a more perfect union, because the Confederate states that they had in the 1770s and early 1780s, the Confederate States of America actually were 13 independent nations combining solely for the purpose of keeping foreign governments from coming in and taking over each of the colonies separately. So in other words, there was like a pack of neighbors. You may live on the same block, but the rich guy's up at the top of the block in a big house. That would have been the state of Virginia or the state of New York. The little guy in the little house at the other end of the block might have been Rhode Island or Vermont. The state of Maine didn't exist until about 1820, 1822. So the original 13 colonies, the original 13 states, they're like all in this one block called the Eastern Seaboard. Nobody really knew very much except George Washington about anything west of the Appalachian Mountains. That was just like no man's land, and nobody really understood what was out there. Hadn't really been mapped except by George Washington, who, as a very young man, did a survey for a British Crown colony as part of an official British Kingdom survey of the land. He understood how vast this land was, but he never got to the Pacific Ocean, which I'm sitting very close to right now. Anyway, these colonies had issues, and so they decided to form a more perfect union. That's why it starts, in the preamble, in order to form a more perfect union. They're recognizing, number one, they have a union, and number two, there's some issues with it. So they needed a more perfect union. They needed a unified currency. They didn't really have a currency. And if you try to find a silver dollar minted in 1775 or 76 or 77 that says United States, you won't find it. But no such thing existed. Yet they were doing commerce, and they had what they call payment certificates that were issued by different merchants. And sometimes a silver token. This was the money, but they didn't have a Federal Reserve note. Didn't exist. Federal Reserve didn't come in to even planning stage until 1910, and that was a conspiracy to defraud the people. And in 1913, they implemented their conspiracy. So how do we get from all of this background? You have to understand the background to understand the grand jury. The grand jury is not part of Article 1, it's not part of Article 2, and it's not part of Article 3. Now, most people would think the grand jury can be found in Article 3, which is all about the court system. You have, Article 1 and Article 2 talk about the rights of Congress, the powers of Congress, and what they don't have power to do, and the executive branch, and what it doesn't have power to do, and what the limits are. If you read this, they're very clearly delineating what the president cannot do and what he can do, what Congress has power to do and does not do. And everything else that they hadn't thought of, or some future generation might think of, is reserved to the people. They didn't say reserved to Congress or the last retired Congress or the Senate or the past presidents or the past Supreme Courts. It's reserved specifically to the people. Now, when you read the Seventh Amendment to the Constitution, and I just urge people they should read it. It tells you a lot. And you read the article about the grand jury. The grand jury is of the people. It isn't found, and SCOTUS stands for Supreme Court of the United States. SCOTUS specifically pointed out, and this recently deceased Supreme Court justice who died very strangely, mysteriously on the border of Mexico in a weird little small county in Texas.
Justice Scalia. And I was going to ask you a question, if you don't mind. I know he advocated for citizens grand jury, but is the verdict still out on whether or not we can still form and conduct citizen grand juries?
In my opinion, after going to law school for 3 years and deciding not to become an attorney, and sat in 1,000 cases in hearings like the Michael Jackson case and the case against Conrad Murray and too many to name, my opinion is the citizens grand jury never died. People just forgot that they have this right. And there's a case out of Carolina in 1796, Crudens versus, Crudens, Crudens versus Neal. And and it's not even in the first U.S. court reporter. You find it in those early volumes of 1796 that were written up by private court reporters. It's not found you won't find it in one U.S. 5 or something when they started making official U.S. Court reporters recorded and paid for by the government through the United States Supreme Court. This is prior to that. In Crudens versus Neal, it points out not only do you have a citizen's grand jury, they should be spontaneous, and it's made up of your neighbors and people that know you, and they know the person who's done the dirty deed.
Mm-hmm.
You never hear anybody quote Crudens versus Neal, but Scalia knew about Crudens versus Neal, and when he made his statement, he wrote the majority opinion in this one case. He laid it out very clearly. The grand jury is a fixture of its own right. It's not part of Article 1. It's not part of Article 2. It's not part of Article 3. And looking back from our corrupt government today that is so corrupt, it's been corrupted through ignorance, and it's also been corrupted because people do not comprehend the idea that we, the people, are the ultimate authority. There's an incident that happened right after World War II in Tennessee. I don't know if any of you got anybody listening from Tennessee, but there was this very corrupt sheriff, and he was corrupting the election, and the election counters were literally thrown out of the elections office by the sheriff, who was going to make sure that nothing changed. He's going to stay sheriff, his cronies were going to stay in power, and he didn't give a damn what the votes were. Well, he threw the people out, and he shot and injured one of the election counters that stood his ground.
Wow.
The end result of that was the people mobilized. First, the election officials started talking to their wives, their uncles, their brothers, their sisters, and someone made a video of a film of it, and I have a little video clip on my YouTube channel where I replay part of that. But in the end result, these people went to arrest the sheriff, and they literally surrounded the sheriff in the sheriff's own office department and had a shootout with him. I mean, they're literally shooting it out, and these are World War II vets, most of them that are doing the shooting, have just come back from a war, so they're not afraid to pick up a gun. They know how to use it. And they're shooting it out with the sheriff there in Tennessee, and he flees from Tennessee because he knows they're going to arrest him, they're going to have a short trial, he's going to be indicted by a grand jury of his neighbors and the people that know him, and then they're going to have a short trial, and they're going to hang him. So the sheriff fled from Tennessee across the border to Georgia, and he never came back.
Sorry about that.
The issue was resolved.
Uh-huh.
Now, did the grand jury ever form? No, but they would have formed, and that's what you have to be. You have to be so damned angry, and so many people have to know of the corruption, and that's why I'm using this case from, I think it was 1947 in Tennessee. People have to know that the sheriff is so corrupt, the judge is so corrupt, nothing left to do, but the authority results goes back to we the people. We ain't putting up with this crap anymore, and now we're going to take action. But that only works if you've got a large majority. Now, there isn't such a thing as a large majority. Most people are too dumbed down, don't care as long as they got beer in the fridge and their favorite sitcom comes on, and their boyfriend's going to come over and help them reach our climax tonight, or their girlfriend. They don't care. As long as these things, beer is cold, and the boyfriend, girlfriend's there. They don't care about their neighbor. In the case I just told you about in Tennessee, I have to say, in my opinion, the grand jury is still alive, because when we the people act together, even you can't get a majority, but what it was the majority of the people that knew of the corruption, and that was probably 100 or 200 people in that county that were willing to pick up their guns, get in their vehicle, go down to the sheriff's office and tell the sheriff, you're under arrest, come on out, put your hands up, you and all your deputies, you're all under arrest. So we the people are arresting the sheriff that they supposedly allegedly elected, but he had been reelected during World War II when most of the men were off at war, and nobody knows if whether the election was on the up and up. But they knew when the election came up in 46 to 47, something was crooked, and the sheriff threw the election officials out. When it gets to that level where enough people are fed up and they won't take it anymore, and they get their guns, then the grand jury, the citizens' grand jury, can be very effective. That sheriff didn't surrender. He fled the county and the state of Tennessee for asylum in Georgia, where apparently he originally sprang from. And he saved his life, because the chances are very good that those Tennesseans would have had a grand jury indictment that night. They would have met, had a grand jury, decided to indict him, set the trial for the next day or the next week. They would have put him on trial, and they would have hung him. They would have convicted, and he would have been executed along with at least one of his deputies. So they escaped. So to my answer to your question, is the citizen grand jury dead? No, it's just sleeping, because people always have this power. The power in the United States resides with the people. Now, if you're talking of the all capital letters, United States of America in all caps, that's a corporation. That was formed later by the crooksters, or what I like to call the banksters, to defraud you of a legitimate grand jury. And today, most people's grand juries are appointed by a judge. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say a judge appoints a grand jury. Scalia recognized that. He recognized that. When I pulled up his case and started talking about it on TV, it was only about a year or two, and it was right after this guy, Anthony Williams, called my attention to it.
I remember.
It was only a short time after that, Scalia suddenly dead.
I know.
And very mysteriously.
I know.
And his family, his son is a Catholic priest. I talked to Reverend Paul Scalia in the D.C. area. I called him up, got him on the phone, and he was scared to death to talk about it. And all he would say is, well, the death has been too soon. I can't talk about it. And I said, well, how about your sister? And he said, oh, she's going to be, frazzled, words to that effect. And please don't call my sister, and we're just grieving. But I could tell in his voice there was something going on behind the scenes. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't know who I was. He had never heard of me.
So
that was a scared Catholic priest.
Yeah. That whole situation was very shady in regards, even the very brief investigation and no autopsy performed. So we have a crisis, okay? And I had created a post to the American people. I've had on several of the, I had on Michael Gill recently, who has the platform State of Corruption and the TV show out of New Hampshire. And we've had 4 major alternative media platforms censored. And it appears that the FCC is culpable with censoring, and one very well-known platform would be Alex Jones, and he was fined $15,000, and he's been temporarily pulled from the airwaves. And a newspaper reported there's a lawsuit filed in Austin, Texas, that alleged, that he was functioning without a license since 2013 and had been transmitting from a tower at an Austin apartment complex. So there's some really shady stuff. The Federal Communications Commission seems to be conspiring as well. And they're also shadow banning the President of the United States online, censoring his reach as well. And I'm just curious why our president hasn't spoken to this, and when we, the people, are really going to get fed up and push back.
Well, if you're asking me, President Trump has spoken to it. He's not an idiot. He really is up to snuff. He knows what's going on. But the problem he has is he's trying to undo 100 years of shadow government getting slowly entrenched. This all goes back to the bank gangsters. These are the very same people that we had a revolution against. And everything my ancestors fought for in 1775, 76, 77, and two of them were still fighting in 1781 with some regiment of George Washington's army. Everything they fought for has now been stolen. There is nothing left of the freedom we had 230 years ago. And all of this has been orchestrated very carefully by people with the big bucks, because they create money now out of thin air. Prior to 1910, they were mainly only a big influence on the Eastern Seaboard, principally in New York City, Philadelphia, Delaware, and the state of Delaware, and Atlanta, Georgia. But outside of the Eastern Seaboard, prior to 1910, most of the country still had intact the liberties of the Constitution established in 1787 to 1789. And most people can't even comprehend what I'm talking about. That's why I had to lay the background, and I went into what we revolted against. Mm-hmm. What we revolted against was not so much the king, though he's the puppet head. Even in 1780 and 1790, 1800, King George III did not own. Bank of England been owned by what I call bank gangsters, the Rothschild, and their clique of cabal criminals. The Bank of England itself, and I was in Italy in 2013, or was it 2012? I was on an island in Italy near Capri, the famous island they did the 007 movie, action film of boats jumping over things and stuff. I was on this little island called Ischia, and there were two British businessmen in their late 30s, maybe early 40s. And I simply asked them a very simple question while we're sitting in this gigantic spa. And I said, do you gentlemen come from London? You sound like a London accent. And true to their Cockney accent, they said, yeah, of course. And we're just here on holiday. And I asked them, I said, well, do you know who owns the Bank of England? Now, you would think two up-and-coming entrepreneuring British subjects right out of the heart of London would know, because they're in business, who owns the Bank of England. And they both looked at me kind of blank and said, I don't know. I guess the Queen owns the Bank of England, or I don't really know. And they were being honest. They didn't know, and they're from England. They're from London, and they're businessmen, apparently successful that they can afford their vacation where I was vacationing. and they didn't know who owned the Bank of England. They thought maybe the Queen or the government. The government of England does not own the Bank of England. The Rothschilds do. It's privately owned, just like our Federal Reserve. These are the shadow governments, and these guys make sure whoever's president, they get one of their guys in the Department of Defense, they get one of their guys in the Secretary of State's office, head of the CIA, head of the FBI. They make darn sure they've got all the key offices of government with a bank gangster-funded person that owes their allegiance, number one, not to the Constitution, number one, to the Rothschild banking combine or cabal. I like to call it a cabal, or I just call them the bank gangsters. And that's true for the CIA, the FBI, and you may remember, if anybody listening, research it, don't take my word, there was a head of, I forget at the moment whether it was the FBI head or the CIA, the number one guy, suddenly died swimming in the, I think it was the Delaware River, which came right by his pad. He had a house on the pad just out of Washington, D.C. And here he swam here for decades, and he drowned in 4 feet of water. And he was replaced because he was dead. I strongly suspect, though I've never spent a great deal of time researching it, that leader of, I forget if the FBI or the CIA, I'm just having a senior moment because I'm over 70, but I strongly suspect he didn't do something the bank gangsters told him to do, and he thought, I'm the head of this big, powerful agency, no one would dare touch me, and he was wrong. The same was true with Nancy Schaefer. She was a former state senator from Georgia, and she was fighting the pedophile ring that was well taken over most of Georgia's CPS agencies. And I talked to her on the phone several times, sent her a cell phone just for her and me to use, and no one else. And I remember her distinctly telling me, "Oh, I'm the daughter of a Georgia judge. No one would dare touch me." And that was the last words I heard out of her lips. She was dead just a few days later. Supposedly, allegedly murdered by her husband, which is a lie. And I went to Georgia myself, and I talked to people very close to the Schaefers and discovered clearly and without question she was not murdered by her husband. She was murdered by the pedophile ring. That's what the bank gangsters are capable of doing. And they like the pedophile ring. And allegedly, I don't know for a fact because Trump hasn't told me face to face, he's got 4,000 or 40,000 sealed indictments to get these people. But I'm sure he's aware. But allegedly, he's going to have them arrested. And the real issue is the grand jury, the citizens' grand jury, still a viable object? The real question is, can Donald Trump execute 40,000 warrants for arrest for everything from murder to pedophilia against the deep state, which is the bank gangsters' network, very carefully constructed network over a century. They've spent a century creating this network we call deep state. And that's why you can't get justice, and it doesn't matter if you go to the FBI and complain about a local crooked judge or local crooked DA. You rarely will ever get a result that you're going to like. Because the deep state does things, and they have something on everybody that is anybody. They got something on them. And if anybody gets to think they're too powerful, they can stand up against them alone, like Nancy Schaefer did. You quickly find yourself dead. And the thought that her husband, who she affectionately called Bear, and most of us that knew Mr. Schaefer called him Bear, the thought that he would shoot his wife while she's sleeping in the back is so ridiculous. You know, it comes to the point of thinking Amy Duran raped Mother Teresa on the backside of the moon last night. Number one, Mother Teresa's dead. Number two, Amy Duran has no way to get to the backside of the moon. I mean, that's how ridiculous the thought that Bear would kill his wife, Nancy Schaefer. It's also ridiculous to think a guy that swam in the same shallow water decade after decade would drown himself in 4 feet of water, or that he would become incapacitated while swimming. You know, it's just ridiculous. That's the deep state at work. That's what my friend, Radio Rebel, he was known as Radio Rebel, Michael Golden, out of Fresno, he didn't quite comprehend. And he kept shooting his mouth off about local deep state operatives in Fresno. And I kept telling him, you know, Mike, you need to tone it down a little bit because they will come after you. Well, allegedly he died from a heart attack. We know now that the government has a weapon that can cause heart attacks. Mm-hmm. Barry Goldwater discovered some of this stuff while he was alive. So, yeah, the grand jury of the people is still viable, but it won't work unless you have a really large minority of people that are willing to take action. And I need to warn you, there was a lady up in Colorado, I think in Boulder, near Boulder City, and I talked to her once, and she was giddy with joy, just absolutely, I could hardly calm her down. I was talking to her on the phone, and she was just so giddy. She was going to go after the bond of these public officials. She was going to collect on their bonds and put them in a world of financial pain, and she formed her grand jury, not knowing that some of the members that volunteered to be on her grand jury were actually secret agents of the government that were undermining her. And she did her process and started to make waves. And the last I talked to anybody connected with her, they were all in jail, except for the undercover agents that were supposedly working with her in her grand jury. So if you just got barely enough people, you know, 15, 16, 18 people, you just got barely enough people to form a grand jury, you're probably going to be subverted from within. You're going to have a couple of people that claim to be wanting to help you and be part of it, but you do a background check, find out who they really are, and she didn't do that. She was just glad to have people come out of the woodwork to help her. I know she didn't do a background check on, because if she had, she would have discovered these guys work for the government. Uh-huh. They have government jobs. They're actually in cahoots with the sheriff that's going to arrest you in 3 weeks. So they tried it. The other grand jury I know about was in Northern California. And I went up and interviewed the guy. I've never published my interview with him, but he was a local California State College professor. He was not some dumb bunny. He was pretty bright, pretty smart. And he formed a grand jury, got people that knew him, and his issue was he was not being allowed to see his son. He got a divorce, and his wife would just break all the court orders, ignore the court orders, and not let him see his son, who was coming into his teenage years, and all he wanted was her to obey the court order. So he formed a grand jury, and the grand jury appointed themselves as a militia, and they marched according to what he told me, and I have it on video. I've just never published it yet, because I wanted to find more successful cases of grand juries. They marched into the courthouse, going to arrest a judge that would not hold his wife in contempt of court for violating his order. And there's many a dad has had this problem where there's an order for visitation, and they try to see their son so hard, but the wife obstructs it. And so the dads get really angry, but they don't know what to do about it. Anyhow, this professor got the grand jury of people that knew him, knew what he was about. They weren't strangers to him. They weren't strangers to his wife. They weren't strangers to the judge. And I'm saying that for a reason. I'm going to tell you in just a second or a minute. They appointed themselves the militia to go arrest the judge. I don't know why they didn't go arrest his wife, but we didn't get that far in the interview, if I remember right. I'd have to listen to the tape. It's been a decade since I filmed them. Anyway, they march into the courthouse. I'm trying to remember the county. It's one of the it wasn't Napa County. I think it was Yolo County, California, way north, almost to the border of Oregon. They go marching in. Where's the judge? Where's the judge? Let's arrest him. We're going to take him down to the jail right now. And the DA comes out of his office because he's in the same building. This is a small county in Northern California. And the DA comes out, what's wrong? What are you doing? Or what are you doing? Don't go in and arrest the judge. What are you doing? You know, and so the DA stops him and says, hey, what do you want? And he says, okay, calm down. I'm going to fix this. So the DA interrupted the process. And he really had been ignoring this one professor's right to see his own children. So now they make a deal. He says, look, I'll make a call. He makes a call to the wife. Wife says, okay, all right. And the DA says, look, if you don't let him see his kid, I'm going to have you arrested. Tells the wife this. You're going to be arrested if you don't let him see his kid. So, okay, a deal is struck. He gets to see his kid, and they never did arrest the judge. The problem was resolved. What's my point? My point is you have to have a lot of people who are willing to get involved and do what nobody else has done. Arrest a sheriff like in Tennessee, or arrest a judge like in Yolo, I think it was Yolo County, California. You have to have people willing to take that step. And once you have that number of people, whatever number it is, 10, 20, 50, 100, when you have that many people who are committed to see justice happen, then you really don't need the grand jury anymore. Because the people will make the justice happen. What's happening is they're telling us the judge appoints a grand jury. That's not according to the Constitution. That happens by default, because when the DA needed a grand jury, and the grand juries weren't forming themselves, they just took the liberty to have a judge appoint them. That's not a constitutional grand jury. So virtually, the only reason they get away with doing what they do is because they assumed the power that's not granted to the DA to lead the grand jury or the judge to appoint the grand jury. None of that is in the Constitution. They assumed the power. They took the power under the corporation, under the all caps United States of America. That's how they do it. But that's not the we the people grand jury. I have yet to see a grand jury of we the people that formed it the way it's talked about in the old books, where the people come together, they know who the criminal is, they know who's been badly trespassed against, and they take evidence, they record the evidence, either on a videotape or a audio tape or by a court reporter that they pay for, not the government. And then after they've got all that done, they vote to indict the wrongdoer, whether it's the sheriff or it's the judge or it's the ex-wife that won't follow a court order. I've never seen this happen. I'm still looking for it. It could happen. It may have happened and I didn't find it. But that's the way it should be done, a grand jury of the people. They vote to indict. Then they appoint an official to lead the militia, or they appoint the sheriff to go make the arrest. Now, the current sheriffs that we have today, under the system we work with today, they're under the all caps, the corporation. They're not going to heed a grand jury of we the people in most cases. Now, there are 5 or 6 sheriffs that said they will, if it's properly done. One is up in Seattle. I don't know if he's still in office, but there was one up there 10 years ago that said if it was properly done, he would exercise a grand jury indictment by we the people grand jury. But it had to be done properly. And to do the grand jury properly, you have to give some kind of public notice that the grand jury is forming. Then the grand jury has to select the grand jury foreman, the recording secretary, and the secretary. And the recording secretary and the secretary are not necessarily the same person. Could be, but not necessarily. But they're separate from the grand jury foreman for sure. Then, after they've done that, they either authorize a militia, which is every able-bodied person willing to pick up a gun if it's necessary to pick up a gun, and it may not be necessary, but affect the rest. But you have to have a sheriff to detain that person after you've effected the arrest, and it has to be done in a peaceful, if possible, peaceful way. Now, the case in Tennessee, the sheriff knew he was going to be convicted and he was going to hang. So he resisted to the max. He ran out the back door, holding the hot iron, and they had to surrender. But the sheriff got away in that case in 1947, a county there in Tennessee near the Georgia border. In the case up in Yolo County, the DA cut it off because he didn't want to see, and I did talk to the DA. He didn't want to talk to me, and it was really obvious. It was really obvious. I can't remember the DA's name, but I did talk to him as well as the professor. The DA did not want the grand jury to actually recognize their own power and start taking action. He didn't say it in those words, but I'm paraphrasing what the district attorney said. He said he'd rather just do it through a few phone calls and the sheriff that they had in place and the powers that be. What he didn't want is the people waking up that they always had this power. They just haven't exercised it, and so everybody's forgotten.
Well, we
the people are the ultimate authority.
I think
I've answered your question on the grand jury.
Yeah, and we have this
issue. There may be one that I don't know about that is still operating and doing well, but I'm just telling you what I know from my own personal knowledge.
Well, we currently have this issue where, it used to be journalists, investigative journalists like yourself, and, people like myself, we would report and actually, we had a journalistic integrity to somewhat police corruption that was originally what was intended for journalism. We have this situation now where freedom of speech is being challenged, and I'm wondering, are we the people going to push back? And why isn't this a huge issue in Congress right now?
Let me repeat your question. Why is Congress not doing something?
Well, yeah, I guess why isn't Congress I don't know. I guess I'm watching this and, I'm watching all this go down, William. And, some people may not like Alex Jones personally, but that's neither here nor there. We have freedom of speech and, communist style tactics. It's like China, no due process for Alex Jones. And these tactics, it's like communist China.
Well, to answer your question, why isn't Congress doing something? Actually, Congress did do something in 1957, I think it was the year. They did do something. The problem is the people don't have a Congress. The corporations have a Congress. Let me repeat that again, in case you didn't catch it. We, the people, do not have a Congress. The corporations have a Congress. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand, and it's really clear to me that there's nobody representing us in Congress, we the people.
Exactly. The last person that stood up for the people and is still alive was Ron Paul, and he's retired from Congress after 2 presidential runs as a Republican and being almost frozen out of the debates because he was speaking for the people. And he couldn't get the media, the corporate media, I'm not talking about you, Amy Duran, or myself. He couldn't get the corporate ABC, CBS, Fox News, the NBC peepsqueak. I won't even repeat his dastardly name. He kept cutting Ron Paul off in the middle of his answer. They would just cut him off because it was making too much sense. He would interrupt him, cut him off, and switch to somebody else and ask somebody else a question when it was Ron Paul's turn to speak. And I watched that farce they called a debate in the primary the last time around, and I this whole election is a sham. The election's a sham. Our vote really doesn't matter. At least on presidential and statewide offices, it doesn't matter. It does matter in county offices and city offices. Your vote does matter. Unless you're in a big city like Los Angeles, Atlanta, or New York City.
Well, me personally,
you got to be in a small.
Personally, I think voting is very important.
If you're in a big community that's been corrupted and your vote isn't going to matter, no one's going to listen to you. It isn't. They throw the votes. I watched it happen here in Santa Barbara. I watched them steal the election.
Yeah.
I watched it. What happened? I went in there with my camera rolling, and the first thing they told me is, "You can't have a camera in here." I said, "Oh, really? The election code says everything is open to the public. You can't have the votes counted secretly. It's all open to the public." And she kind of backed down a little bit and said, "Well, that's true, but you can't have a camera in here." I said, "It's not a camera. It's a video camera, and it records everything, including what you're saying to me right now." And she got all hostile and said, "Well, I'm going to call the election officer." I said, "Please do. I'd love to talk to him." She said, "Well, you got to wait outside, or I'll call the police." So I asked my cameraman, and we went outside. This was at called the Girls Center in Goleta, which is a little city next to Santa Barbara. It's actually the same size as Santa Barbara now, but that's where they were counting the Santa Barbara County votes, and they absolutely were horrified at the thought that I was going to tape them just simply counting the votes. I was going to zoom in and count out one ballot, which are all secret ballots that don't have your name on them. Anyway, so you'd have to know the code and know who had that code to know whose vote they were counting. But, according to the California election code, all of the process, except you're voting in the voting booth, everything is supposed to be in public, viewable by the public, and they were just in conniption fits. So what I did is when I left, I went out to the parking lot, and I looked at the bumper stickers on all the so-called volunteers that had come in to count the votes. And every single one of them had an Obama sticker on it. There wasn't one Republican among the volunteers to count the votes. And our elected official in charge of counting votes, they were also an elected Democrat. And it was really clear they were doing what they call the mandatory 2%. They have a small percentage of votes that they recount. And there was a 2%. They allegedly select randomly, and they pick 2% of the people, and they recount the votes. Problem is, how random is it? Mm-hmm. Nobody knows. And they didn't want any cameras in there verifying. Later, I questioned whether the vote was really random, whether the votes were counted honestly. There was some, and I filed a letter of protest, and they waited like 3 weeks because I sent the letter certified. And they waited about 3 weeks, and then they got back to me. And when they got back to me, they said, fine, we'll do it. And I only wanted one city recounted. There was 4 precincts that had very suspicious voting pattern. But weeks went by, and then I got a reply, and they said, oh, you have to post $25,000. No, I'm sorry, it was $10,000 in certified funds. You have to put this up every day. You have to put this money up in certified cash funds each and every day. And I said, really? Why is that? Why do I have to pay for this thing? And they wouldn't give me an answer. They said, well, you've got 7 days to put up the fund. You got to put up the money in certified funds, and if you don't, the 30 days are passed and there'll be no recount. And I refused to put up the funds because they refused to let me have my camera anywhere taping the recount of the vote. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to put up $10,000 a day, and you employ the people, and I can't have a camera in there. But there were 4 precincts that had very strange voting patterns. I found at least 25 people who had been dead for more than 4 years. And yet they managed to get out of the grave and vote. And I thought this was really strange. I still think it's really strange.
Well,
and I'm still angry about it. But if your vote isn't counted honestly, and you can't watch them, now I should tell you, both the Democrat and Republican Party had what they call official vote watchers. And I had noted on the logbook, both of Democrat and Republican showed up at the same time. They registered their.
Well, I'm encouraging everyone to vote. Actually, we had William. This election is so important, and the corruption is so horribly bad. We have child sex camps being discovered and systematically destroyed by the authorities, one in Arizona and one in New Mexico. The one in New Mexico, 11 children were being starved, and 5 adults were training children as shooters, school shooters. This is not unusual behavior for the feds, from what I've gathered.
Well, there's a gal, she made a whole film about the corruption election. It's called Democracy Hacked or Hacking Democracy. I forget the exact name of her film. It was a really good film. And she did just what I did, only she published her film for money. And she had a great success, actually. She made money off her film, and it was starting to get traction and get played a lot of places. I'm trying to think of her name, and I can't right now, but the name of the film was Democracy Hacked or Hacking Democracy. And what happened to her is, first they threatened her, and she lived in a community. She was a white woman who was really upset, but she was married to a black man. And she lived in a community where there were still issues on interracial marriage. She lived in that kind of a community, and she wanted to keep it quiet that she was married to a black man, I guess. But first they threatened her, and that didn't do it. Then they bought her film, said, look, we're going to just buy your film. We're going to buy all rights to your film, and you can't sell this film anymore. You can't show it to anybody. You can't do anything with this film. You're done. And then they threatened her husband's job. And all of a sudden, you didn't see Hacking Democracy anymore. It just wasn't available for viewing. It was on YouTube for a long time, and then it just started disappearing. Luckily, I had filmed it off of YouTube, copied and downloaded it. I'm not sure how I did it anymore. And so I still have some significant portions of it. But it was interesting to me that they shut her up, and the lengths to which they went to shut her mouth, to make sure she never talked about it, and nobody ever knew anything. I mean, today I doubt if anybody listening even remembers Hacking Democracy or Democracy Hack, whatever it was called. They shut her up. So unless you're voting for district attorney, your county DA, your county sheriff, those are the most important offices. Your sheriff and your DA. If your sheriff won't arrest you, you're going to be okay. Or even if he does, but the DA won't prosecute you, you're going to be okay. Your Bill of Rights will theoretically still be intact. But if you can't trust your sheriff and you can't trust your DA, which at least in our county, when Michael Jackson was being put through his trial in 2005, we could not trust our DA. He was crooked to the bone. Well, absolutely, completely crooked.
And more,
there wasn't anything any of us could do about it.
I want to touch on a case that you recently reported on regarding targeted individuals, Randy and Evie Quaid, who actually fled the country. And they're probably, I mean, they've survived I would say, near death by the corrupt criminals. And what can you tell me about that case?
Well, funny you should ask. I talked to Evie Quaid a few months ago, and she wanted me to do some further investigations for her, but I wanted a face-to-face interview. What I do know is a forensic document examiner named McDonald came out and did an exam on the documents in our county, Santa Barbara County, where the house in question that the Quaids had, and she determined there was multiple levels of fraud in the documents. Mm-hmm. Multiple levels. And that's all I can tell you, and that's on my YouTube channel, the William Wagener channel on YouTube under Quaid, Quaid, and McDonald, MC, capital D, I think it's McDonald or McConnell. I think it's McDonald. It's a woman investigator. So she's the expert. She was the one invited up to Seattle and invited by a city to investigate their county stuff up there and determined that their county documents were all fraud. So the fraud in the court is just terrible, but it's based on fraud by the clerks and a lot of other fraud. And the sheriffs aren't trained to deal with it. They're just not trained, nor are they equipped to have the tools to recognize the fraud. This is the perfect white-collar crime. But in the Quaid's case specifically, since you asked them, it appears to me, and I could be wrong, but it appears to me their business manager was in on the fraud. And without his involvement, what happened to them couldn't have happened. They thought they owned the house. They trusted a certain person to do everything for them. Then it didn't work out that way. And suddenly, a corrupt DA at that time in Santa Barbara allowed some kind of bench warrant or something to be put out for them. Think straight north to British Columbia, and they left America. And this guy was famous. I mean, Randy Quaid was in many films. He was in several famous commercials. He's the face you see in these famous commercials. He's it's just not. This is not some obscure person. You know what I'm saying? It's not some obscure person that nobody
No, in
knows
fact,
about.
he's a major Hollywood star, and they're depriving the world of an amazing talent.
Exactly. He's not some obscure person. So how can they do this to somebody? Well, they can do it because they've got the power. They've got the time. They've got the money. And the Quaids were so busy making money and flying around the country, they weren't paying attention to their own pocketbook. That's my best guess. But until I interview the Quaids face-to-face, which they've been, reluctant to do for whatever reason, I don't know. But they've been reluctant to do a face-to-face interview. They just want me to do research for them. But I do believe they've re-entered the country, appeared to a court in Vermont. The court said this is a bogus warrant and dismissed it. So I believe they're back in the United States. They're just staying out of Santa Barbara County where the house is, which is ridiculous for somebody this famous. He's not famous for being a gangster or being a huckster or something like that. This is a movie star. This is a film actor of well-known repute. One night I was watching TV, which I rarely do, and there was 2 films in succession. Randy Quaid was in both of them. I don't know, maybe it was Randy Quaid night, and they were playing all his films. But I'm watching all this, and I'm saying to myself, something is really, really wrong. Somebody needs to fix it. The DA's not fixing it. He's part of the problem, or she is part of the problem. We have a female DA now for the first time in history, and she's not fixing the problem. She's part of the problem. Just like the former DA, Tom Sneddon, was a huge problem. And the people didn't know it because he brags about his conviction rate and whatnot. And that was good until he failed to convict Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson was actually innocent, completely innocent. And all the fraud came out in court. Everybody saw it. I saw it. I reported it. Most television networks didn't report it, which to me was a great disappointment to see them lying night after night during the trial. And that was way back in 2005.
Yeah, that was...
How you fix this? Only a grand jury of we the people, but they have to have a lot of people who are really pissed off and they're willing to show up. Without that, I don't see how it's going to happen. Just don't see it.
Well, William, I'm so grateful for you coming on the show today, and I hope you join us again. I do have to wrap it up because school's almost out. But you want to share with everybody your TV show, your platform, where they can find you?
Yeah, you can see clips from my local TV show. It's local only in California, in several counties in California, but you can see it on YouTube or clips from it under William Wagener, Wagener. Just putting that in to YouTube and you pull up. Unlike Alex Jones, most of my stuff is still up there. Though I have to tell you, there was a time for about a week, there was everything I had on YouTube dealing with mortgage fraud and foreclosure disappeared just without warning. I didn't get a notice. Just everything that had foreclosure, corruption, anything like that disappeared off of YouTube. And I didn't complain to anybody. I just let it be. And a week later, mysteriously, it all appeared. And my most recent video uplink, my newest one, was showing that I documented that did happen. Now what I'm getting from YouTube is warnings saying you got one strike, you use copyrighted music. Well, at the time I used the music, it wasn't copyrighted. And I usually don't use any music at all, but occasionally I do. But it's not copyrighted music when I use it, generally. If I did copyrighted music, I agreed to let them put ads on my video clip. But now what's happened is somebody's come in, and I've taken music from what they call the General Open Music Pool, and it's not copyrighted, that's why I use it. And somebody copyrights it, and then they file a claim against my video. So they're targeting me that way, and if they can get 3 strikes against me, then all my videos on YouTube will disappear like Alex Jones.
Well,
So
I encourage you. We have an expert. Well, she's a psychic investigator who specializes in computer crimes, targeted individuals. Katrina Hagen. She's in the Social Media News Network, and you should definitely reach out to her.
Okay. Send me that name privately in a private message, and I'll take a look at that.
Okay, I will do. Thank you.
I got to go, too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I got a lot to do yet today.
I shared a link to the show to your Facebook profile, so you can share it from there. William, thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Have a great day, Amy.
You too. God bless.
God bless you. Protect you, too. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. That was William Wagener, the host of On Second Thought. His TV show is published to YouTube. He has a YouTube series there. I will be back for a TGIF music show on Fridays at 7:30. And this has been another episode of Porthole to Justice, the window to the truth. Oh, and I'm going to play a song. This is a song called Nowhere by Zeph Daniels, and it's featuring Kelly Rowley lyrics.
Can't you hear?